Across humanity, stories witness us, and through them we see, we hear, and we grow. I'm Pauline Chu.
And I'm Peter Rizzi, and this is Book Feels, a podcast about how books made us feel and how we feel about books. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is a coming-of-age young adult novel published in 2001 by Ann Brashares. It follows four best friends who spend their first summer apart and stay connected by sharing a pair of jeans that magically fit all of them perfectly.
First is Carmen Lowell, who is excited to spend quality time with her father in South Carolina, and instead faces sharp disappointment when she is faced with her father's absence and a surprise soon-to-be stepfamily. Then we have Bridget, who attends a soccer camp in Mexico, where she meets an attractive and off-limits coach and ends up biting off way more than she can chew.
Then there is Lena Kaligaris, who is beautiful but withdrawn. She spends the summer with her grandparents in Greece, where she meets and has a misunderstanding with the village's favorite boy, Kostos. Finally, there is Tibby Rowlands, who is the only one of our main characters who remains at home. While at her summer job, she develops a life-changing friendship with a 12-year-old girl named Bailey, who has terminal leukemia. Pauline, this book was a favorite of yours, one that I think was one of the main inspirations for this podcast, and you went looking for a discussion and couldn't find one that you liked enough. You want to talk about your relationship with this book?
Yeah, I read this book when I was in middle school, and it was one of the first books that really captured, I think like the mature themes of growing up as a girl and having special girlhood friendships that are so close and that see you through really hard things. And I don't know, Carmen goes through a lot of the growing pains that divorced children go through. Bridget goes through running away from like the hurt that she feels from really intense and unavoidable tragedy. And those were feelings that I had at that age that were just starting to come to light. And the fact that this book even existed meant so much to me because it meant that I wasn't alone. And I just couldn't find a podcast that talked about that. And I don't know, it made me realize that books have always been my solace, and they've always helped me feel not alone. Like, books were the first thing that made me feel like there were more people like me, that I wasn't uniquely broken. And this is not the first book that started it all, but this is one of them. And I'm so grateful for this book, and I'm so glad that we're covering it.
I'm glad you found the book and shared it with me. It's not one that I read growing up.
Well, it's a super girly one.
But I was excited to read it and do it together. And yeah, excited for this episode.
Yay! So, Peter, one of the reasons why The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants was such an important book to me when I was young, I was middle school when I first read it. That's also the age where I started becoming aware of how much more complicated the world was. And since that time in my life, the world has only gotten more complicated. The more I've learned, the less I've really understood. And I feel like this book really shows that quite well. I think every character kind of goes through that journey. Do you want to talk about that?
Every character has this experience of thinking things are one way and realizing they're actually another. We want to start with Carmen, who has this kind of idyllic version of her dad in her mind. Her parents are divorced. She continues to live with her mother in Maryland, and her dad has moved to South Carolina. And they have what seems like a pleasant relationship where she enjoys visiting with him from time to time when he makes his business trips to DC. And this is the first time she's going to spend an entire summer with her dad.
Yeah.
And she's so excited. She's thinking about all of the things they're going to do, just hanging out in his one-bedroom apartment where she's going to have all of his attention and they're going to play tennis every day. And
she sounds like a kid when you put it that way, like a child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She arrives and her father kind of is a little, I don't know, not forthcoming with her upon like the initial car ride. And before you know it, he says, "Oh, there's something I wanted to tell you in person." And they're pulling into the driveway of a place that is not a one-bedroom apartment. It's a
It's a full-on house in the
full-on
suburbs.
house. And she goes to the front door, and there's like other teenagers greeting her and a woman.
Yeah. And it's going to be they're going to be her step family. And that's the first she's learned that she's going to have a step family.
I was so angry when I first read this.
It's shocking.
It is shocking that her father could justify not telling her that this was what the summer was going to be with this idea that, oh, I wanted to save it for in person.
Yeah.
You should absolutely tell Carmen what the summer is going to be, what she should expect.
Yeah. He totally threw her for a loop. And I think even if he wanted to do it in person, which I sort of understand the logic of, like, take your fucking kid out to a restaurant, just you two, hang out, just you two, and say that you need to say something to her. Like, it's to just kind of throw his new wife on her is insane. And then to also have her stay in that house with the new like, you know, soon to be wife and soon to be stepchildren, like, that is bonkers to me.
And on this theme of growing up, things not being what they seem, there's this initial shock. And then there's Carmen's deepening understanding of her stepfamily.
Yeah.
She is very abrasive to them at first. She doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to interact and spend time with them.
And you really can't blame her.
No, of course not. It's a total shock. She had one expectation for what this summer with her dad was going to be, and it's been totally different. In fact, the times where they've had plans to play tennis or hang out together, he ends up canceling and going and watching the stepson's lacrosse game.
Yeah.
And Carmen is in this environment, and what she eventually finds out is that her stepfamily are not these kind of one-dimensional evil people whom she wishes not to be around, but that they have been through some difficult things themselves.
Yeah, they're whole people.
The stepmother, whose name I can't remember,
Lydia,
was formerly married to a man who was an alcoholic and is actually now in rehab treatment. And the stepson,
Paul,
visits the dad who's in treatment regularly, whereas the stepdaughter does not.
Yeah, because it's too upsetting.
It's too upsetting for her. And just so many complicated dynamics going on with that family that Carmen kind of comes to realize and sort of deepens the way she thinks about the situation.
Yeah, I think that on the surface, Lydia does seem kind of silly and annoying because she's just talking about canapes and locations and dresses. Yeah, she's just like talking about flowers all the time. And Carmen already doesn't want a stepfamily. And to like have to hear about things that she like really doesn't care about. Of course, she's going to be annoyed. But then she also finds out that like the first time Lydia got married, her mother had passed away. So her wedding was basically canceled and she couldn't have a real wedding. So this time she really wants a wedding. And then also to have, you know, like this like tragic backstory of her husband. Like, I think that really troubles Carmen. Like, I think she just wants to be mad at them. She doesn't want to have to see them as a full human or like as complicated people. And that's, I so relate to that. I think that sometimes it's easier to just paint someone in a monster suit and like leave them there. You know, it's easier to hate somebody kind of in a simple way instead of having to see like that they live a whole life outside of you.
And Carmen tries to find a balance in her own feelings and her new sort of more compassionate understanding towards her stepfamily. I think there's this moment where she decides she's going to say one nice thing to Lydia. But the reality of the situation is that Carmen's dad is really just not there for her. And even as Carmen tries to maybe adjust a little bit more to be nicer to her stepfamily, there's this continued dynamic where her dad is just emotionally unavailable, and it's really devastating for Carmen. And it all kind of comes to a head when Carmen runs off feeling kind of miffed one evening. And when she returns, she thinks, oh, I bet they were out looking for me. And she sees the whole step family sitting at the dinner table together without her.
Yeah.
Like no one even thought to go after her.
That's such a heartbreaking scene. I think it's interesting that Carmen learns how to, like, she learns empathy in a way. Like, she's just like, oh, Lydia and her dead mom and her alcoholic ex-husband and Paul not really having a dad and, you know, all these things. And she feels really sorry for them. But also Carmen is like 15 or 16, I think. She's 15 in the beginning of the book. like that is old enough to start learning a little on your own, but you still need some guidance. And so it's not Carmen's fault that she slips back into kind of like a petty, childish mindset because there's no one there to guide her. Like the person who's supposed to guide her is ignoring her, like just straight up ignoring her. And I think like being neglectful in a way that is super harmful. So I can't blame Carmen for kind of acting out again, you know?
It's not her fault. And this scene where she sees them at the dinner table ends with her throwing a rock through the window and then taking is it a bus back to Maryland.
Yeah.
She's had enough of it. And what happens afterwards is she feels immensely guilty. And I remember in the similar vein as when she first got there and I was feeling so angry that her dad had not told her what to expect. I was feeling really angry that she had to be the one who would feel guilty here because really she's not to blame, just like you said.
Yeah, I think like we'll talk about it like later on in the podcast as well, but like Carmen's dad doesn't really make amends. He doesn't become a better father. I think they come to an understanding with each other, but he remains kind of underwhelming as a father. But I mean, I also want to talk about, you mentioned Carmen throwing a rock through the window. After she throws the rock through the window, she sends Bridget the pants because while she is wearing the magic pants, she throws a rock through the window, and she tells Bridget, I hope that you have some sense because I promise you it's not overrated, basically. And Bridget receives the package and doesn't really listen to Carmen's words, and does some pretty destructive stuff. And I think she learns that I think Bridget sees the world. I think you mentioned this, Peter, when we were talking before recording, that you find Bridget to be very innocent. And in a way she is. I think she doesn't know how much she can hurt herself. She definitely is someone who, not literally in the book, but like metaphorically plays with fire. And that manifests in this case through her pursuing her soccer coach while she's in this soccer camp in Mexico. And it ends up with them having sex, and she is really not ready for it.
On the one hand, Bridget is spending the nights at soccer camp like stargazing and laying out with her friends and kind of not wanting to go back to the cabin, just soaking in how beautiful, they're in Baja California in Mexico, just soaking in how beautiful the sky is, kind of having these like deep thoughts of just joy and at the same time, like you said, really pursuing this older camp counselor.
Yeah.
She's 15. I think he's 18 or 19 and has begun college. Yeah.
Yeah. Way too. That's a big age difference at that age.
And when you say playing with fire, I mean, the way it is portrayed in the book, she is really pursuant. And he is kind of giving mixed signals, at the one hand, you're beautiful and I want this. And on the other, no, we can never do this. And eventually she's pursuant enough. She shows up in his cabin room during the night and they do have sex.
Yeah. And I think when you're young, sex is just this idea you don't understand yet. And then when you have it, if it's like not safe or appropriate, and you're maybe not like emotionally safe for it, it becomes way more complicated than you know. I think people underestimate how complicated sex can be. And I think that's what kind of leads Bridget to a bit of a mental breakdown. And I'll read a passage there. This is right after she and Eric do the deed, and she's kind of just left on her own. Long after she'd left Eric, she lay in her sleeping bag. She shivered. Her eyes were full. They dripped from sadness or strangeness or love. They were the kind of tears that came when she was just too full. She needed to make a little room. She stared at the sky. It was bigger tonight. Tonight her thoughts roamed out into it, and like Diana had said, they didn't find anything to bounce off of. They just went and went until nothing felt real, not even the thoughts, not even thinking itself. So I think that she just like went too fast and didn't realize like what sex would actually do to her, didn't realize what she was doing to herself. I think that's really hard. That's like kind of like a child getting their way and realizing that like their way of like was actually really bad for them.
And how can you know at 15 years old what sex will be like?
Yeah.
In our culture, we often don't talk about sex with, our peers, much less our family, and kind of get that guidance from our parents. And Bridget's mom, in fact, is not even around. She's died several years ago. So it makes complete sense. And I think it's a story that probably a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah. I think that it's like when you don't have, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd all have moms and dads who we would be comfortable talking to if we were like thinking about having sex. And they would also be comfortable telling us what it means to have sex with somebody, like the bonding chemicals that happen, the like the logistics of protection, like and also just like wanting to have sex with someone who like respects you and who knows you and who you respect. I think that is not really talked about with teenagers. The people just sort of, especially in the U.S., it's like a really abstinence forward culture, and they don't necessarily talk about respect. I think they're starting to talk about consent more. That's not the same as respect. So,
Growing up, the messages I got about sex were, "You're too young."
yeah.
And that message doesn't work because young people are interested. Young
Yeah,
people
it's
are curious.
unrealistic.
It's unrealistic. And yeah, I can think about how much more helpful it would have been to have more
Hmm.
open and honest conversations about sex.
Yeah, I think that someone like Bridget, it feels really good to flirt and it feels really good to have attraction like shared with somebody else. Like we've all been there. Well, not all of us, but like a lot of us have been there. When you're young, you know that feeling feels good, but you don't know what it means, you know? And I just wish that she had, as always, I wish she had somebody looking out for her. I don't think she would have done the same thing if she had like a stable mom and dad, to be honest.
And I know you relate to Bridget most in the story. She's the character
Yeah.
which is your favorite character.
She is, yeah. Because she's so brash. Like I definitely had moments where I had like Bridget moments where I flirted outrageously with boys, and it felt really good, you know. I, was put into an all-girl school, which I hated for so long, but looking back, I feel like in a way it was good for me because I think I would have gotten in some major trouble with boys if I wasn't in a co-ed high school. Um, yeah, poor Bridget.
Speaking of boys, maybe we should talk about
Oh,
Lena
the
and
one love story.
yes, the kind of romantic love story we get with Lena and Kostos, a Greek boy. Lena is spending the summer in Greece with her grandparents, with her Greek grandparents, as opposed to with her parents back in the United States. And she's also with her sister, Effie. And Lena's shtick is that she's not interested in boys. She's not interested in people.
She's very like she doesn't trust people.
She's does not trust people and kind of prefers to be on her own.
Yeah, she's an introverted artist, which I can
Yes.
relate to.
Yes. And as soon as she gets to Greece, the very first night she's there, her grandparents have organized this sort of welcome dinner, and her grandma kind of pokes her a little bit, and she's like, "There's this boy who's going to be here," and Lena wants nothing to do with it. She's so uninterested, and yeah, like you said, she's an artist. She prefers to spend her time on her own, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how she would like her summer to go. But that's not what ends up happening.
Yeah, she's like a lot of us. Like humans are categorical thinkers. Like we think in kind of like segments in order to, it's like a shortcut for thinking. Otherwise, you're just like absorbing information and thinking through information all the time. And that's inefficient and it's unrealistic to think you can do as a human being. So I understand why Lena like kind of puts Costas in a category of like, okay, hot guy who just wants my body. And there's an incident in the like beginning of the book where she's like skinny dipping and he walks in on her and she completely misinterprets it as like he's spying on her, he's following her because she's irresistible and he's just a horn dog, when really it was a complete accident. Like actually she was in his creek where he usually swims, so he wasn't following her. But like she really writes him off as like just kind of like a guy like any other guy that she's been unimpressed with. And she learned something pretty tough about him. Do you want to read that passage, Peter?
Lena is having a conversation with her grandma about Kostos and about the incident itself. And I'm not going to read the quotes in a Greek accent. The W's are replaced with V's in the book. I'm not going to do that.
Please do it, Peter.
Her grandmother says, when Kostos was 3 years old, the whole family was driving to the mountains in the wintertime. There was a terrible car wreck. Kostos lost both his parents and his baby brother. Grandma paused, and Lena felt, even in 115-degree heat, shivery bumps rise over the length of her body. When Grandma started up again, Lena could hear the emotion in her voice. they sent little Kostos back here to his grandparents. It was the best idea at the time. So Lena learns this news story about Kostos, and she says, or she doesn't say, but it's written, she was sad about what had happened to Kostos. And someplace under that, she was sad that people like B, Bridget, and Kostos, who had lost everything, were still open to love, and she, who'd lost nothing, was not.
Oh, that's such a well-written line. Yeah, I think that Lena is somebody who she was kind of stuck up her own ass for a lot of the beginning of the book because she's beautiful, and I think she's used to being noticed for only her beauty. And
I don't think it's an accident that this pleasant interaction with the boy is happening in Greece. She's used to American teenagers who are kind of that way.
Yeah, and like she's probably used to teenagers who didn't grow up with this level of tragedy. And Kostas is somebody who grew up like with incredible loss. And he's a much more nuanced person than she could have ever imagined. And that's based on, it's her worldview opening up about men, I think.
I really like Kostos. The way Kostos is written in the book, there's this scene we both like where there's a kind of an end of summer celebration, and Kostos is not dancing with any of the like pretty teenage girls who clearly want to dance with him. He's dancing with all the grandmothers who helped raise him.
Yeah,
all the village grandmothers who took care of him after his parents' death. And we finally get to the end, towards the end of the book, Lena realizes that she has genuine feelings for Kostos, that as much as she'd been trying to suppress them and pretend that he was just another boy who she wasn't interested in, she does like him.
Yeah, I think also something that I wanted to point out was Kostas undergoes an incredible tragedy. He loses his entire immediate family. And yet he seems like to be a pretty well-adjusted guy, at least in this first book. So, because it is a series and a lot does happen throughout the series. But Kostas, I think throughout the series kind of remains a good guy. And it's a lot to be said about how much love can cure things or fix things in a way, because he's loved by an entire village, and he's raised with a ton of love. Like, obviously, nothing will replace his immediate family, but I think that he was still able to be nurtured into a good person.
Finally, of our four characters, we have Tibby, who is kind of seen as this, like,
rebel without a cause.
Rebel figure, she's written as having a nose piercing, which I guess in like 2008 was like a big deal.
I mean, when you're 15, I guess it is.
Yeah.
In the movie, she has blue hair.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And she is the one who's stuck at home for the summer. She's not off doing something different like the rest of her friends. She has a job at the local pharmacy, and one of the ways she kind of realizes that things are not as they seem, she's expecting to have this boring summer. She sees all her coworkers and reads them as just these boring, uninteresting people. And she ends up at the inspiration of a good friend she makes, Bailey, who I'm sure we'll talk lots about, being inspired to create a film. Or she had the inspiration herself, but Bailey really urged her on to actually follow through on it, creating a film documenting her summer experiences. And Tibby interviews these characters all over town. There's Margaret, who's like an older lady who's worked at the local movie theater for decades.
Yeah.
And
also your favorite character.
I love Margaret. I just think it's such a nice little slice of humanity, this woman who just loves the movies and has worked there all her life. And, on first glance, Tibby would write her off as someone who's weird or
a kind of a loser.
Yeah, a loser, exactly. And through this interview discovers just how sensitive she is, and
also maybe Tibby wonders like what happened to her, and like realizes that maybe she's lonely. I think she starts to feel some compassion for her.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's another character, one of her coworkers, Angela, I believe it is, and I can't remember the exact quote, but Tibby says something along the lines of, all I had ever noticed about Angela was her weirdly long nails, and Bailey helped me realize she was so much more than that.
Yeah, I think Tibby has the most fascinating journey in terms of like learning how complicated and how big this world is, because Tibby originally starts off wanting to make a mockumentary about losers, basically. I think in the movie, she literally calls it a suckumentary. I don't know. I can't remember if she calls it that in the book, but it's about people who she like looks down on. And Bailey, her as her like production assistant, basically, sees these people as wonderful humans who are worth spending time with and who are worth getting to know. And I think it's really amazing that this like little 12-year-old teaches Tibby to see humans as more than their surface appearance, which I think when you're a teenager, it's so easy to just see something at surface level and move on with your life. You're still learning how to process the information the world is giving you.
Absolutely. And one of the really funny ways this plays out is that Tibby has this crush on a local a guy. His name's Tucker, and he's attractive. Whatever. She has this crush on him, and Bailey, when she first realizes who her crush is, looks at him and says, "You like him with the slick backed hair and those weird shoes, or something like that."
Yeah, something about like how he seems like he takes a lot of time to like put his hair like in a tousled way, like that he's trying really hard actually. So like I think in Bailey's mind, like Tucker's the actual loser.
And for the first time, Tibby sees beneath the surface level there too, and kind of sees this person for who they really are. And when Tucker approaches her later in the book, she's completely uninterested.
Yeah, I think that's so funny. I definitely relate to that. I've definitely been into guys who like later I'm just like, why? I know you made fun of it because he had a goatee and you're like, ew, a goatee. But yeah, Peter, is there can you think of a time? I'm sure you've had many in your life where something surprised you and you like saw something beyond its surface.
I think what stands out to me from a similar point in life, maybe a little bit younger, like late childhood, early adolescence. I had my fourth grade teacher. I had gone to this really like fundamentalist Christian school, private school, starting with kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. And I was Catholic. My family was Catholic, and there were not a lot of Catholics at this school. I think I was the only one in my year, and there were very few. But my parents didn't like the Catholic schools. So I went to the school, and up until 4th grade, maybe I wasn't aware enough, or maybe there were no real big experiences where I felt like different. And everything just kind of felt very insular, very, everything was as it seemed. And then I had this 4th grade teacher who held me back after class one day and told me that if I didn't convert from Catholicism to Christianity, I would go to hell.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is so intense.
Oh, it was so intense. And it became a whole thing where
you were like 10.
My parents got involved, administrators got involved, and things like that. But that was such a formative experience because for the first time, it was like, oh, things are not quite as they seem.
Yeah.
Like, people are different. There's different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of snowballed into more and more experiences into adolescence where finally I'm so grateful. It was one of the best decisions of my life. My parents let me choose where I wanted to go to high school, and I chose to leave that school and go to my local public high school. And that whole experience and the ones after that as well of, just opening my mind to things really being deeper than they are, things, not everybody thinking the same, not everybody believing the same thing.
Yeah.
And also how it could impact me personally when my beliefs are at the time, what I believed was like seen as not okay.
Yeah. And you were also pretty Catholic when you were younger. So it was scary to have an authority figure say to you that you're going to go to hell.
Oh, yeah.
That is insane.
It was nuts.
Yeah. Wow. I'm glad your parents did step in that case. That's bonkers. Yeah, I think that like a lot of people, I went to a Catholic high school. A lot of people told me that they experienced like a crisis of faith when they got to high school because you start to see a wider world. And you start to see that, especially particularly with religion, I think that can be really hard because it makes up the foundation of your world. So to have that crumble can be really tough. Yeah. I think that's something that, not about religion. Mine is a little more about a person in my life. I think something that I want to note here is that, yeah, we have these big epiphanies when we're teenagers for sure, because our worlds are expanding really rapidly in our adolescence and in college. But I think also our world keeps expanding. And even now I'm in my 30s and I still experience moments like this where I'm struck by how complicated the world is. And it is painful to grow into that. And I also experience moments of like wanting to revert back and sometimes actually reverting back to a more childlike state because it hurts to grow up. So the thing I'm thinking about is, my whole life, I didn't really know my dad that well, but when I did know him, whenever he was in my life, he would lie about everything. But he would lie compulsively. Like he would lie about what he had for breakfast, for example, for no reason. Like he would say he had eggs even if he didn't eat eggs. And my friend who has kids told me that there's a stage of like a kid's development, maybe when they're 3, that they lie a lot to test their realities. And when she told me that, I realized that my father was maybe stuck at that age of 3. And normally you can get stuck at an age when something really traumatic happens to you. And my father has always been the monster in my story, or at least one of the monsters. And he is a very kind of damaging and hateful person. But to imagine him at maybe a young, tender age of development, being stuck there, being like kind of fixed in place by something horrific, troubled my worldview and really, I don't know, was really hard for me to stomach. And it took me a long time to process it. So yeah, I think that's just, I think I don't mean for this to be disheartening, but I feel like the older we get, the more intense those like moments of troubling our world get. But it's good for us, I think, to like have a deeper and more meaningful life.
Good and hard.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing it. And I imagine the listeners can certainly identify people in our lives where, like you, like in the books, we're confronted with some depth about them, some deeper understanding about them that is not easy to accept. I mean, all these girls in the book struggle with.
Yeah. I think they all cry, basically.
They all cry. And yeah, part of their journey is becoming strong enough to face this new reality.
Yeah.
But along the way, kind of avoiding it.
Which is so human.
Running away from the pain of it.
Sometimes you don't want to grow up. Sometimes it fucking hurts to grow up and you want to, right? And you just want to avoid it as much as you can. And when you try to avoid it, it actually can hurt you more.
I just remember this really, when I think back on my childhood, I don't have like a huge picture of how it was, but I have really strong memories. And one of these memories was right before my first day of middle school. I went to my mom's bedroom and cried because I was so scared. And I was saying, literally, I didn't want to grow up.
Oh, Peter, that's so sweet and sad.
Yeah, it's a very real feeling.
Yeah. So something I want to talk about when it comes to, running away from your feelings, running away from having to grow up and be brave, is something that really spoke to me, especially when I was young, because Carmen's father isn't really in her life. And for obvious reasons, I relate to that. And, for the longest time, I also was kind of a daddy's girl. Like, you can see it in Carmen. She's a daddy's girl. She loves her father. And so instead of being mad at her father, who is the one who's being a lackluster caregiver, she takes her anger out on everybody else. She yells at Tibby. She yells at her mom. She hates Lydia and her soon-to-be step siblings. And there's at one point where she's being interviewed by Bailey for Tibby's documentary, and Bailey keeps asking like, "Oh, but why aren't you mad at your dad?" And Carmen is saying stuff like, "I'm not mad at him. I'm not mad at him." But at the same time, her eyes are dripping. And Bailey like rushes over to her and holds her like elbows and says like, "It's okay to be mad." And I feel that as well. Like, it was really hard for me to be mad at my dad because it felt like if I was mad at him, he would disappear. And something that I found really cathartic, and I cry every time I read this passage, and especially when I see it in the movie because the actress is so affecting. It just is heartbreaking, and I will like sob to it. So I'll try not to cry to it this time. So
it's okay if you cry.
Thanks, Peter. This is a tear-friendly podcast. But yeah, so this is when Carmen calls her father after running back to Maryland and leaving him abruptly in the middle of the summer. And she calls him and tells him that she's angry at him. And he says, "I know I should have told you ahead of time that I was going to get married." And she says like, "No, I'm not finished yet." She gave herself a few moments to steady her voice. "You found yourself a new family, and I don't really fit into it." Her voice came out squeaky and bare. "You got yourself this new family and these new kids, but what about me?" Now she was completely off the road and driving fast. Emotions she hadn't even realized she felt were flying past. What was the matter with me and Mom? Her voice cracked painfully. Tears were falling now. She didn't even care if he was listening anymore. She had to keep talking. "Why wasn't your old family good enough? Why did you move away? Why did you promise me we'd be closer than ever?" Why did you keep saying we were, even though it wasn't true? She was flat out sobbing now. Her words rose and fell on waves of crying. She wondered if he could even understand what she was saying. Why does Paul visit his drunk father every month and you visit me 2 or 3 times a year? I didn't do anything wrong, did I? Ugh, Peter.
So honest.
Yeah.
And just like the thoughts are just spilling out of
Yeah.
like all the things she's wondered over the years that she's finally allowed to breathe life into. And
Yeah.
it sounds like her dad, when he left and when they got divorced and moved away, he kept things really cheery, kept things really optimistic. And I think that's what a lot of parents do in these situations, but
Yeah.
it never captures the whole reality of separation. And now Carmen is giving life to like how it actually felt to be separated from her dad as a daddy's girl.
Yeah, I so relate. Like, my dad was in and out of my life. He, like, did not raise me. It took me a long time to understand I didn't really have a dad because, like, I thought I did. I, like, loved him so much that I think I willed him into existence, but he wasn't really in my life. And whenever he did come, he was fun. He, like, would take me randomly to Hawaii, or he would take me to Disneyland, or he would, like, buy me something, like, extravagant and fabulous. And then he would leave, and he would come in and out, like, kind of without warning. And when you're a kid, you think that's okay. Now that I'm an adult, like, I'm really mad at him on behalf of my younger self. Like, that's really not okay. And I
Mm-mm.
think that, maybe for an absent father, I think this is the case for a lot of absent fathers. They think that they're making up for not raising their kid, but really they're just confusing them. But, Peter, I think also all these girls go through something like this, and Bridget and Carmen have a lot in common in this way. I think that Bridget has absent parents in like, I think her father doesn't really know what to do with her, and her mother is gone, and left really abruptly because I think she took her own life. And I also relate to Bridget a lot because she's somebody who pushes herself recklessly, and I definitely skirted the line and flirted with danger a lot. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we talked about Bridget's escapism. She is really pursuant of Eric.
Yeah.
She kind of operates at this level of like being on at all hours of the day. Like her friends are like, when do you ever rest? Because she's
Yeah.
not really sleeping a lot. She's like,
Yeah.
just go, go, go all the time. But we didn't really talk about what she's escaping from. And it could be many things, but the one that we really hear in the book is that her mom died by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a few years ago. I'm not sure how recently it was.
She was pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if you want to talk about this, Peter. I think Bridget, obviously, like, I think nurture has something to do with it, but also her mom sounded like she was maybe manic, or bipolar, and maybe Bridget has a bit of that too.
Yes, it is implied that Bridget's mom had manic episodes, had depressive episodes, and it does seem that Bridget experiences that herself. And I think what differentiates Bridget from Carmen and maybe the other girls in the book in the severity of that kind of way of being is her capacity for self-destruction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see that with her mom, right? Her mom dies by suicide. And Bridget, whereas Carmen's kind of sin is throwing a rock through a window, Bridget does something she's completely unready for.
Yeah, she hurts her own body.
She does.
Yeah.
And that's what's really scary about the nature of pain, the nature
Mhm.
of avoiding pain, and just our human tendency to do it, is that it can go to extremes where we hurt ourselves way more than the pain could.
Yeah, I think that also it's so sad for Bridget because I don't think she's aware that this original wound is from losing her mom. And, like, probably also having a mom who was super unstable to begin with. I think, like, growing up with a dad who didn't know what to do about it, that is already going to have an effect on Bridget. But then to have, like, a sudden loss happen to her, in the book, in the movie, I really think they did a good job adapting the book because Bridget has a line where she says, I just want to feel good and alive so that, if I feel good and alive, it means she isn't dead because she doesn't have to feel her mother is gone. And she herself even seems to have some self-awareness that that she's behaving in a self-destructive way. Like when she is during a scrimmage, she's like really showing off her soccer skills, and her coach is like, stop it. You need to pass the ball. You need to be a team player. This is not for showing off. And Bridget like can't stop because she wants to show off to like Eric so that he will find her more attractive. And the coach like takes her out. And later Bridget just like she feels really ashamed, and she says, this is what the book says. Bridget put her head down. She suddenly felt all the intensity crashing in on her. She felt like crying. She now knew she should have toned it down. Why was it so hard for her to make herself stop? And that's just, I've been in moments like that too. Like it's where you feel like it feels good somehow to like hurt yourself.
She's really struggling. And there's this quote from later after she sleeps with Eric and they have a conversation, and Bridget says, she wanted his profession of feelings to do the trick. She really did. She knew he wanted that too. Whether he spoke the truth or not, he thought he could make her feel better, and he really, really wanted to, but it wasn't what she needed. Her need was as big as the stars, and he was down there on the beach, so quiet she could hardly hear him.
I think that's a beautifully written sentence for grief. Like her need was to fill this huge hole that is unfillable. And you and I have talked about this, like when you don't have a loving parent, whether you lose them emotionally or physically, that's a hole that like really can't be filled in. I think you can heal and transform and have a really lovely and happy, meaningful life, but that hole exists and nothing can take it back.
And like Bridget, we often try to find ways to fill that hole, often through other people, like she does, through romantic interest, through a love interest. And it's so hard to love someone and be in a relationship with someone without bringing that in, and with having boundaries, having a boundaried, secure form of love instead of this intense up and down love that Bridget is chasing after with this older boy.
Yeah. She just wants to feel alive and loved, and nothing is ever going to be enough for her. And I think she's going to realize that later in life. She's really young now. 15 is too young to really understand that, I think.
And I think we're going to talk about it. What fills that hole for her in the meantime in a more genuine way is her friends and the friendship in this book.
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end.
As you alluded to earlier, Lena's story is one that becomes one of a more, I don't know, honest or genuine profession of romantic interest.
Yeah.
She likes this a little bit older boy, Kostos.
She's kind of the opposite of Bridget, actually.
A little bit, because she has been avoiding those feelings all summer.
Yeah, instead of chasing them and like running herself into the ground, she like flees from them and then runs herself into the ground anyway.
And it's really not even her, I mean, she realizes she has these feelings, but she's not really able to admit them until her sister sees the painting she made of Kostos, and her sister is like, "Oh, you like him?"
And she's like, "You love him. You've never behaved this way."
And basically, her younger sister Effie, who has spent the whole summer like making out with this Greek waitress while she has a boyfriend back home, supposedly, and is kind of the foil to Lena, says, you have to be brave. You have to tell him how you feel. Like, you're going to regret it if we go home and you never told him how you feel. And Lena says to her, "But F, what if he doesn't like me back?" And then Effie considered this. Lena waited, expecting, hoping for reassurance. She wanted Effie to say that, of course, Kostos liked her back. How could she not? How could he not? But Effie didn't say that. Instead, she took Lena's hand in hers. That's what I mean by being brave.
Aww.
And just that, for the first time, Lena has to, in order to feel fulfilled and feel hopeful and kind of like we're talking about, be strong, be authentic, has to face her feelings and make a really brave admission of how she feels to Kostos.
Yeah, and risk being rejected, which I think is really hard for, we talk about like how Bridget and Lena have like different styles of reacting to romantic prospects. I think this is like kind of different attachment styles, like Lena is like a classic avoidant attachment style, which I'm not completely avoidant, but I'm pretty avoidant. And I felt a little too exposed rereading this part of the book. So I was like, oh shoot, I do the same thing where if I like somebody, I like really avoid them because I'm so scared. And I've like I've loved my ex-boyfriends. Um, but I will say I've never gone after someone unless I thought or I was pretty sure that he liked me back, you know? And I think that I miss out on so much. And just like Lena does, she could have missed out on a lot if she wasn't brave.
She is brave, and she goes and tells Kostos how she feels while he's
It's
working
so
at the
cute.
forge, as he does. And she's like sweating and stumbling over her words. And
Yeah.
she keeps hoping Kostos will like sweep her off her feet and like, get her to stop talking. But he just kind of looks at her, nodding, smiling, waiting for her to get to the point. And, she finds her way there and kind of tells her that she has feelings for him. And they kiss, and he kisses her back.
Oh, it's so
It's a
sweet.
really, really sweet,
Yeah.
hopeful ending.
I think that's a nice story compared to the other ones. I feel like she has like kind of the least traumatic story out of all four. But it's a classic example of someone being in their own way. She could have had this beautiful romance all summer if she just had gotten out of her own way. But she was just so scared of getting hurt. She was scared of men. And that comes from some conditioning. Like that didn't come from nowhere. But I think it's a reminder, at least to me, like I also have some pretty bad conditioning when it comes to men. It's a reminder for me to like, if you want to have a meaningful life and you have like, if it's within your desires or wishes to have a partner of any kind, that some risks need to be taken in order to like actually engage with life.
And she faced it when she was ready to face it.
Yeah.
She needed to avoid those feelings for some time. And I think with her time in Greece being time bound, it kind of hastens
that's true.
the urgency.
That's
and
true. She
like,
could have spent years
I'm going to have real regret, right? Like if she were staying in Greece forever, maybe it would have never happened.
Yeah. And I've mentioned before that this podcast is, not spoiler free. We talk about everything. In the series, she remains an avoidant attachment style, and she does sort of run away from Kostas and the love she has for him for like a lot of her life. They do end up together, but it takes a while to get there, like a long time. Yeah.
Finally, we'll talk about Tibby, and we haven't talked about her a whole lot.
Yeah.
And what she has to face is perhaps the most traumatic of all, death.
I think so. I think her storyline is kind of the realist. She watches someone she cares about fade away in front of her.
Yeah, she befriends Bailey, who is a younger girl who meets her at the pharmacy one day, and Bailey is dying of leukemia.
Yeah.
And at the same time that Bailey is dying towards the end of the book, Tibby's beloved guinea pig dies.
Mm-hmm.
And Mimi. And it's too much for Tibby to handle.
Yeah.
She keeps getting these calls from Bailey's family that she should come to the hospital and see Bailey. Bailey really wants to see her before she goes. And she keeps ignoring the calls. She's hunkered down in bed. She puts the guinea pig in the freezer. She doesn't know.
Yeah, she literally tries
it.
to freeze the guinea pig in time. Like she just like hides it away and doesn't let it decompose, because that means like there's no time passing in her mind, I think. And she holds up in her room and watches Oprah for ages. Yeah, like it's I feel it. Like I probably would have done the same thing if something like when you're 15 and you've created this like really deep friendship with this like, a lovely 12-year-old who 12-year-olds shouldn't die. They just shouldn't die. But they do, because life is unfair. But that must be a lot for a 15-year-old brain to try to compute. Especially if that 12-year-old is really teaching you so much about life and like making you a better person. It's hard to lose that person.
It's impossible to compute at that age. And it makes complete sense that she can't function.
Yeah. What I love about like, all of these girls, I relate to them because, I think it's a very human thing to want to avoid pain. And you harm yourself in the process of avoidance. And I have done every single one of these things that these girls have done, but like particularly Tibby, who like holes up and watches TV and just kind of eats junk food. I think that's a classic way of dealing with something that you don't want to face. And
it's not that there's never a time or place for that.
Yeah.
There's a time and place for gouging on ice cream and laying in
Yeah.
bed after something horrible and tragic happens.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for reminding us of that, Peter. Yeah, I think that's really a kind way of looking at it. Like, this person is having a really hard time, like, understanding what's happening, and she doesn't necessarily want to understand it, because I think to understand it would be to, like, feel it. Um, and when she is finally ready to go see Bailey, she visits her, and she ends up being able to visit her a couple times before Bailey passes away. And Bailey is playing this, like, video game, and she hands it to Tibby because she's just like, I'm too tired. Will you play it for me? And so Tibby's sitting next to her in the hospital bed playing this game, and Bailey says, keep playing. And then she dies really soon after. And in this really poignant scene, Tibby takes her frozen guinea pig Mimi from the freezer and goes to Bailey's grave, and buries Mimi with Bailey. And there's this beautiful quote that I'd love to read. Ground over Bailey's coffin was still soft. Tibby pushed aside the carpet of grass and dug into the soil with both hands. She kissed the paper bag and planted Mimi in the hole. Then she covered her over and put the grass back in place. She sat down on the grass over the two of them. She saw how pretty the moon looked, falling low on the horizon. A big part of her wanted to just stay here with them. She wanted to curl up into the smallest, simplest possible existence and let the world rush along without her. She lay down. She curled up. And then she changed her mind. She was alive, and they were dead. She had to try to make her life big as she could. She promised Bailey she would keep playing.
It's so confusing at that age to have all the feelings of wanting to curl up and literally freeze time, like you said,
Yeah.
and not face the reality of what happened, and to understand the nature of life and death and understand that whether she wants to or not, she's still here, and her friend
Yeah.
Bailey and Mimi are not. I feel like it's something that I've found personally very meaningful is, I lost a friend at 24.
Yeah.
And
too young to lose a friend.
Too young to lose a friend, too young to be a pallbearer at a friend's funeral. I mean, just so horrible. And over time, and this is why I say it's so confusing, because it's like I have felt more at peace. I have transformed my life in a lot of ways that have been really meaningful because that happened in my life. And how can that be true and this wonderful, beautiful person can be gone? Like, it's so complicated and confusing.
Yeah.
And the strength, like we're talking about this theme of being strong enough to continue on, this strength that Tibby has in this moment to get up out from the grave and continue on, and to realize that at 15 that she's still here. I think it's amazing, and I think it's a testament to what this book is really about, is friendship.
Yeah, it came from Bailey.
It came from Bailey. It came from a really strong person who was a really good friend.
And I think also, similarly to what you were saying about your experience with your friend passing away, like, Tibby wouldn't have found the strength without Bailey dying, I think.
And this is what makes death so confusing, is because it is a profoundly transformative experience. Like, it profoundly transforms the people it touches. Not always for the best. It can transform people for the worst too. It's
I think it's a complicated,
such a tragedy.
Yeah.
And how can that be true? And it can mean that someone is no longer here. It's just so confusing.
Yeah. I might have referenced this in past episodes, I'm not sure, but there's this really beautiful interview that I love between Stephen Colbert and Anderson Cooper. I don't know if I have told you about it.
You told me. I don't know if you told all our listeners,
yes,
but I've heard about it.
I will talk about this. I highly recommend watching it, because it's just like a beautiful meditation on grief and life with grief, after grief, etc. And Stephen Colbert says something to the effect of, if you are grateful for your life, which is a healthy thing. It's healthy to be grateful for your life. Then you can't really cherry pick what you're grateful for. You kind of have to be grateful for all of it, because all of it is linked together. And he says that from a place of deep knowledge because like he lost his father and two of his brothers at a really young age. Like it changed his life completely. And he thinks like there's another Stephen out there somewhere who still has his dad and brothers and who's a completely different Stephen from me, but I like the Stephen who I am now. And it's really hard to get to that place in life because I think that when tragedy hits you like this, it will do damage. It will hurt. But I think that as you know, in the other books, I think Tibby is one of the, I think, kindest and most empathetic people. Like out of all the four girls, like she has this like deep wisdom that they don't have, and I think it's because of Bailey and that experience.
And I think everyone who's experienced grief, like the people you're talking about, like the people in this book, like myself, will agree that getting through it is not possible without friendship.
Yeah.
Without being in a relationship with other people who can help you get through something like that. And that's what this book is about, is all these girls going through tremendously transformative experiences, growing up, facing pain, having to be strong. And it's this pair of pants that they send back and forth to each other across the world, and the friendship they share, the letters they write to each other that help everyone get through it.
Oh, Peter, if you knew, like every girl in my generation has tried to do something like this where they had like a pair of something that they would share with their friends and pass around. I tried to do it so many times with my friends.
What happened?
I mean, we would just forget about it. Like I didn't have these magical experiences that these girls have. But yes, I agree that the book does such a great job at showing, I think, like friendship during girlhood. I think like female friendships when you're young are so particular. They're so interesting. Like when you're young, you are able to become friends with people who are pretty different from you because you sit next to each other in class, basically. Like for these girls, they become friends because they were all born in the same month, essentially, and their moms took the same like labor class or whatever. And then you can remain friends even though you're really different. And also, I don't know, I think like your girlfriends become something that's like between like a sister and a boyfriend almost, like, or a partner. Like they have this like weird intimacy with you that I think you lose as you get older. Like it's not really like that later. But when you're young, it's like they will do anything for you.
And early in the book, something that the narrator says about, maybe I can't remember if it's in the prologue and the epilogue are narrated by one of the girls.
Carmen, yeah.
And it's like, their parents keep telling them that these friendships aren't going to last. Like they're going to face real life, or they're going to love boys, and, the friendships are going to end. And like you said, there's truth there. Like these friendships do change over time. But I think what I love about this book is they resist that for one more year.
Yeah.
And they all get together and they acknowledge that a lot has changed, but they still love each other and they're still friends.
And you still see them perform like amazing feats of friendship within the book, even though they're separated for a summer. Like Carmen and Tibby have a fight, but even so, she still comes and supports Tibby and like brings Tibby the pants to give her the strength to go see Bailey. Like,
yeah, I think originally Carmen shows up and sees that Tibby's like sprawled out in her bed with junk food wrappers everywhere, and Tibby's like, "Leave me alone, go." And Carmen's like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening? What's wrong?" And Tibby's like, "Just go." And Carmen's like, "Okay, like you asked me to go, I'm going to go." But it's like you said, she comes back. And
yeah, she comes back an hour later with the pants.
Right. She doesn't stay. She doesn't keep, being there when Tibby doesn't want her to be. She just leaves the pants. And it's just this act of love and this act of like, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this act of, they have unconditional love for each other at this point in their friendship.
They do.
Like they can fight and love each other.
Yes.
And then I think what's the most touching for me, like I definitely cried when I read the scene. Bridget sends these letters to Lena after she's had sex for the first time, and they're very troubling letters. They're like, "I'm scared. I think I did something wrong. Like they're not okay." Letters.
And mind you, this is coming from a far distance. This is the west coast of Mexico to Greece.
Yeah, basically. So Lena is on her way back home from Greece to Maryland, and she changes her mind, and because like she's so worried from these letters that she like changes her plane ticket like while she's on a layover and flies all the way to Mexico to go be with Bridget because she's worried about her. And I'd love to read a passage there. So first, Lena explains that she had known Bee well enough and long enough to be worried. She knew Bee's life had been remade at one point. There were fault lines from then. Bee sprinted along in a torrent of activity, but once in a while something unexpected slammed her hard. It left Bee slow and uncertain. She fretted. She wasn't good at putting herself back together. Bridget was like a toddler sometimes. She grasped for power, she demanded it, but when she got her way, she was left only with herself, and that terrified her. So that's a really profound way for a friend to know you. And then when she does arrive in Mexico and like immediately like brings Bridget the pants to give her strength and like goes for a walk. Bridget says to her, "I can't believe you came all the way here," Bridget said. "Why did you come?" Lena dug her toes into the sand. "I wanted you to know that you weren't alone." Like, that's just, I don't know. Like that, that's so sweet. And honestly, I could imagine my girlfriends when I was in high school and middle school, like the girls I'd known since like I was 5 doing that for me.
Yeah, just like a heroic feat of friendship. And like you said, unconditional love.
Something that maybe we would call codependent today at our age. Like it's a touching show of friendship when you're young.
And yeah, I think you pinned it. It's unique to female friendsps. This is a phenomenon that I have not experienced.
Yeah, no one's flown
among
over
my
for you
friends growing up. No, and but it's really nice, and it's funny. I'm sure we'll talk about it when we do our book intro. That when you suggested this book and I first read it, I read the prologue. I was like, okay, this is a girl book. Like this is as girly of a book as it's gonna get.
So girly.
But it was beautiful. It was touching. Like I loved it.
Yeah, I love it too. I'm so glad I got to share it with you.
Yeah. The book ends, like we said, there's this very real portrayal of friendship where these friendships are not going to endure forever, but they seem to endure one summer where they've all been away and they all get together and have their kind of end of summer ritual like they normally do. And there's this beautiful quote, "But we were quieter tonight. There was more care and less ordinary teasing. In a way, we were still strange to one another, I realized, but there was comfort in the pants. The pants had absorbed the summer. Maybe it was better that they couldn't talk. They would let us remember more how we had felt and less what had actually happened. They would let us keep it all and share it." And yeah, it's just such a real portrayal of friendship that, things are changing.
Yeah, you sort of start to see the cracks. Like they're not together all the time anymore.
They're not telling each other exactly what happened every single moment of every single day, which I'm sure is a part of that age of friendship.
It is,
it's more like, oh, how did we feel? And there's some things that are going unsaid, and there's less teasing and more care. Like more just seeing of like, oh, you went through something this summer.
Yeah, especially when it comes to treating Bridget with care, for example, like or Tibby. Like those two girls really went through some pretty like life-altering things that summer. And I think that they, as 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds, like probably cannot even articulate what they went through. So their friends don't know how to handle them either. And that's, I think, a really normal part of adolescence because we're all just kind of learning when we're teenagers.
They can't articulate all these feelings. And just to close with a quote that's pretty much the end of the book, it says, "It wasn't that we hadn't shared the big outlines of our stories. Of course we had. I had told him all about how Al's wedding was. We knew that Bea had messed herself up over Eric. We all saw Lena talk about Kostos in a way she'd never talked about a boy before. We knew about Bailey, and we knew intuitively to be careful when we asked Tibby questions. But there were a million little lines of shading that we couldn't convey so easily. They were the subtle things, and understanding them, even knowing when you missed them, was what separated other friends from real friends, like we were."
Yeah, like, see, I do think the book ends on a hopeful note that like these are people who care deeply about each other, and that doesn't go away. But I think it's also realistic that like, yeah, they know each other a little less now. And that's what happens when you grow up, I think, with your friends. And I think it can be really shocking for girls in particular because like you behave. I've had so many of my girlfriends call me boyfriend because like I'm so close to them that like, and we're just really close that they're like, they've said like, "Oh, Pauline's a better boyfriend than my boyfriend," like they'll say shit like that. That's not necessarily healthy at our age, but like, I think it becomes shocking when your friend actually does like grow up and partner up and have a husband, and all of a sudden you're not like you're a best friend, but like a best friend means something different now than what it used to mean. And I think that's just part of life. And I don't think the book tries to hide that at all.
No, it's a part of our adolescence of growing up is we create our identities and
Yeah.
we have deeper inner lives. And I do think, yeah, it's a very authentic note for the book to end on, a book that we both really loved and that's
Yeah.
really special to you.
It really is. I'm so glad it exists. And I think it's such a good portrayal of what it means to grow up as a girl.
And that's all, folks.
You can find Book Feels wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at Bookfeels Podcast or email us at bookfeelspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.